Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Professor Dr. Hassan, Dr. Tan, and also Dr. Pradeep. That was a very interesting lecture, and I learned something myself also. So my team actually has prepared a presentation slides coming from our head of leadership. We actually have a leadership program because we thought that in order for the company to continue to grow globally, we need to make sure that we have a good succession planning. Like what Dr. Pradeep said, a good leadership would be not just what you have done in the company, but what you have left and how you can actually allow the people there to grow and continue the company to grow further and be better than what it is, basically. I am a bit conflicted on what I should be doing, actually, because when I was speaking to some of the students before I came in, I was asking what this program was all about, basically. And they seemed to be more interested in my experience and how I got to where I am today. So I'm not so sure whether I want to present something that has been done by our team, which, well, in all honesty, I was struggling. I only managed to get a glance of it. But it seems a little bit more of a textbook thing. And I think Dr. Pradeep probably do a better job than me in terms of presenting what leadership is. But perhaps a better value added for this session would be, from my experience, how I got to where I am today and what I experienced in terms of leading the company and what the challenges are. Would that be a better option for you guys? Okay. How I got here, okay. Well, I was born and brought up in Petaling Jaya. I was born in Asunta Hospital. I went to Asunta Kindergarten. I went to Asunta Primary School. And then because I was in Asunta Primary School, they put me in Asunta Secondary School. So I'm a true blue Asuntarian. I don't think anyone could be as true blue Asuntarian as I was, actually. When I was growing up, I guess I was blessed with having parents who encouraged me to be what I want to be. And they're not fixated to what kind of line I could be going into. To them, it's like whatever you choose, make sure you be the best at what you do. At first, I wanted to be an architect because I met my father's friend who was building a whole township, and I thought that was very interesting. And then one day, when I was a teenager, I saw a sitcom called Family Ties. I don't know whether you guys have actually watched Family Ties before, but it has this really cute character which I fell in love with. His name was Alex Keaton. I don't know why I fell in love with that character, to be honest. Maybe because he was quite cute. He was played by Michael J. Fox at that time, and I was probably about 11 or 12 years old. And he has this very interesting character. He said that he's actually a Republican, and he was into all this Wall Street kind of thing, basically. And there was this particular episode where he was competing with someone in his class to win a scholarship to London School of Economics. And he wants to be in Wall Street, he wants to be a Republican and that sort of thing. And he lost to the girl. And he was in desperation mode, and he really wanted to go to the London School of Economics and things like that, basically. And I thought to myself, that's really interesting, what he wants to do. And then at that point in time also, during that period, you have movies like Wall Street. I don't know whether you have watched that before also, because maybe you were born after that movie has actually been produced. And my dad was reading a lot of interesting books in relation to Wall Street, like Liar's Poker or Barbarians at the Gate. Things like that, things about mergers and acquisitions, things about the whole war in Wall Street on how one company wants to do better than the other and how they try to merge with another company. Or in Liar's Poker, they talk about trading, bonds trading, where people at that time their aim in life is to be, well, like, is to be a BSD, which I will not explain what it is, but it means that they want to be the best trader that they could actually be and make lots and lots of money at that point in time. So I was intrigued by this whole thing. So at that, the whole idea of Wall Street, the whole idea of war in terms of buying out companies or looking at the best valuation of a company. If it's cheap, why not just buy it and expand and that sort of thing. It actually intrigues me, and I thought, okay, I want to be like Alex Keaton, which is really silly at that point in time. And I said to myself, I want to go to London School of Economics. And I worked hard. I was focused and I worked hard and I got myself into LSE. Once I was there and I thought to myself, okay, I got where I wanted to be. But the next thing that I wanted to do was to go to New York itself and see whether I can experience what this Wall Street's all about. And I thought I want to be a BSD, like what I read in Life's Poker. So I suppose when you're young, you're influenced by all this, what you have read and what life is to be for you, in the sense that, you know, you go there, you make some really great deals, you know, you make lots of money out of it, and you know, maybe that's what life should be. So at university, when I was graduating at LSE, almost 90% of the people I know at LSE wants to be in investment banking. So they were going to interviews to Goldman Sachs, to Morgan Stanley, Credit Suisse, all the investment banks that you read or you know about in Wall Street or so. So I thought, okay, so this is probably where we should be going. This is where we should be heading, basically. So what I did was, after I graduated from LSE, I thought, maybe I shouldn't really start working yet. I want to explore what New York has to offer. So I actually applied for a master's degree in the US. And it so happens that New York University was the only university that I applied. And thank God I actually got accepted, because otherwise I may have to find a backup to go somewhere, maybe not in New York City itself, but somewhere near New York, basically. So as soon as I went to New York City, what I did first thing was not just to enroll myself or to explore the whole city, but I also make it a point to go for an internship in one of the big banks that people actually mention, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, that sort of thing. Internship is actually something that you do, but you don't actually get paid. But I don't care. To me, it's the experience that counts. And it's not like as though I get to be in New York all the time, or probably this is the only chance that I'll be in New York City. So I make sure that my classes were all in the mostly in the late afternoon or the evenings. And the thing is, as being a master's student, you're able to do that. And I make sure that in the mornings, I'll be an intern in one of the banks that I applied. So I was an intern at Payne Weber. It wasn't really a good job, really, because my main task was to cold call. I have to call every stranger that there is, not only in New York City, but in New Jersey area, maybe in Connecticut as well, to find out whether they would like to invest or they would like to appoint Payne Weber as a stockbroker or so. And it's not exactly the most pleasant job, but it's something that has to be done, and it's a learning experience for me also. And I learned that you can't be where you are without actually going through all the nitty-gritty details or doing the dirty work, which nobody wants when they're at a certain position. I think by actually working at the lowest level, you learn a lot more of what really the company really is, or what really public really wants, or the consumer really wants, as opposed to sitting at the top position right away and trying to strategize and think what the consumer really wants or what the public actually needs. So I actually grit my teeth and just went along with it. And I needed something in my resume also, because once after I graduated from my master's degree, my aim was to also study, no, not to study, sorry, was to learn as much as I could on trading, on investment banking and all that, and I wanted real life experiences. So my aim after master's degree was to actually seek for job opportunities in one of these banks, basically. So I did all the course that I did. I didn't really just stick to the number of credits that's required to do my master's degree. When at New York University, even though I was in the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, they also allowed me to take courses at Stern Business School. So I took extra credits also to understand what is there, and to also to build my network with other business students who were in the industry as well. So once I've graduated, I got a job offer at Deutsche Bank Securities. Now, getting a job interview in New York isn't as easy as what it seems. There's a lot of competition. Everybody wants to be an investment banker. Everybody wants to be a BSD or a hotshot trader or so. And it's not easy, especially when you're a foreigner, because they do have a strict ruling about employing only Americans, basically. So I needed to stand out. I needed to show that I am worth being employed, basically, even though I'm a foreigner and a Malaysian. Hardly most Americans actually know where Malaysia actually really is. So I observe how the candidates were being interviewed, because usually when they have this career fair and the bankers were there, so they will be interviewing a series of people before it gets up to you, basically. And I noticed that a lot of the times, candidates, they just have a set idea of what the interview would be, and they just basically prepare themselves on what they expect the question that they're going to ask. When I went there, I basically just turned around the interview and I interviewed the person representing the bank itself. So I asked questions. He didn't have the chance to really ask me questions, and I asked him questions: what does he do? How does he feel about this industry? What kind of employee is he looking at, and why does he need that kind of employee, and that sort of thing. And I think it's probably he probably felt that this was different, because it's usually the other way around when he interviews the candidate itself. So I think that tactic actually worked, because then I got a job at Deutsche Bank Securities, basically. And what they did was they put me in the management program, whereby you'd be rotating in various departments for a couple of years, and then finally they put you in a department where they think that you would probably give the best value to the company. Okay. So I entered the program. It's not exactly the kind of program that I like, because it's on operations, because I wanted to be on the trading floor. But I went along with it because I thought, okay, this is another chance to build my network. So they put me in operations in which I have to do settlements of trades that were done by the traders around the world, how they were trading securities and bonds and everything of that sort. And I made it my business to basically understand how these trades came about. I didn't just focus on what the jobs that I needed to do in order to know how to settle these trades so that their settlement are done on a timely manner. But I also went out to understand who these traders are when they do these trades, and what's the idea behind it, and why they're doing these trades. Why are they shorting certain stock, but they're buying certain futures? Why are they going long on certain stocks, and then after that they strip off the warrants attached to it or so? Because the settlements over there are not just straightforward settling, just straight, security, equity trades also, but there are bonds, there are warrants, there are rights and everything of that sort. And each settlement has got different ways of processing it, because the trades that are done are actually not as straightforward as you would think. So I asked my boss, can I sit in one of these trading desks to really understand what the trades are behind? And he said, sure, maybe that's a good idea, because then you can perform your job better. So he said, which desk do you want to sit in? So I said to him, I want to sit in this desk called Equity Arbitrage Trading Desk. And that was headed by this hotshot trader called Dan Gold. And he said, you sure you want to be there? Because he's actually one of the nastiest traders that Deutsche Bank ever had. But he actually made the most money for Deutsche Bank. I said, yeah, because I really wanted to understand why the whole idea behind arbitraging and how he's making that much money. And why is it that he is so nasty, but we still keep him? You know, I thought, you know, we were brought up that nasty people don't last long. They should be kicked out, you know, all our life. This is what we were told. But yet, you know, we tolerate him. And then my boss said, well, maybe because he brings the most money into the company, and that's probably it. So he said, okay, it's probably a great idea I do that. So I sat with him for about a month or so, and he thought that was a good idea because he felt that the operations team, the back office team, that's what the traders used to call, the back office team always screwed up his settlements, which means when he has short a trade, and if you don't settle that trade in time, you have a situation where in certain markets, the exchange will buy you in, meaning that the exchange will force you to buy at that certain price because you haven't done the settlement, which means that whatever profit that you might have thought that you have made may actually not be there at all. You might actually lose money because you're buying at a price which you didn't want in the first place. So he's always shouting and screaming at the back office on why did you screw up my trades and this and that, basically. So I sat with him. And it turns out to be that he's actually quite a nice person because he knows that you want to learn. And he's happy to teach. But he's also very short-tempered. And, you know, he's quite loose in using words where you're not supposed to mention also. But I learned a lot from him. He was a graduate from Harvard and he studied physics and everything. And his team were people from MIT, were people from Caltech. And they were not people who were studying finance or business or so or economics. They were engineers, they were electrical engineers, they were computer scientists. They had structured way of thinking. And I suppose from that kind of background, they look at the financial markets, look at the products that's being offered in the financial markets. They could dissect it and they could see things and see which product against the market, you know, the financial markets are undervalued that could be taken advantage of, or what kind of products that can be stripped off to see how they can take advantage of further value. And most of them, they do a lot of programming in terms of executing their trades. They don't even use the Deutsche Bank's IT department to help them with building the model. They build it themselves. So they create their own thing. And that's what Dr. Pradeep said earlier. You choose the best to be in your team so that they can produce the best and optimize the value of what you're trying to create. And that's what he was trying to do. But he was also very, very short-tempered. So it's very hard to make a mistake, basically, because then you'd be yelled at, you'd be screamed at and everything. But 40% of Deutsche Bank's profit came from his department. And what he does was that he uses money, Deutsche Bank's money, because he's a proprietary trader. The team is a proprietary trading business. And they just speculate around the world. They short certain stocks, they long certain stocks, and at every trade that they do, they back it up with hedging because they know that the probability of achieving what they want to achieve may not be there because they can't control the market, right? You can't be above the market. The market is always above you. So that's what I learned also from them, which every risk that you take in order to extract the best value also, there must be something that you need as a backup to hedge just in case what you want or what you expect from it doesn't turn out, or the worst case can actually happen, and you need to mitigate, to minimize that risk, basically. So I was there for 3 years, and I did learn a lot, and they gave me a little, towards the end, they gave me a little portfolio to work on, basically. How I got there for 3 years? Well, I was supposed to go back to operations, and I was supposed to be in a department where the management program has set for me. But I told them, no, this is more interesting, and I think I can add further value to this department by helping them. So eventually, after many negotiations and after many persuading sessions that I have with the human resources, I finally managed to be with Dan Gold's team for the rest of my career in Deutsche Bank Securities in New York. Why I left Deutsche Bank? After 3 years of working with Dan Gold and tolerating his behavior and all the excitement that you get, you know, I was 24 years old or maybe 25, 26 after I left. It was exciting at first. You have a huge sum of money going in and out, and you're dealing with something that's new. You're dealing with a team that is creating ideas on how to extract the best value of the market, basically. But I found out that I was turning into something that I didn't like. I too was becoming short-tempered, like Mr. Dan Gold. I too was screaming at the back office. And I say, hey, this isn't what my parents actually brought me up to be. Short-tempered, impatient. I was also querying. I mean, that was in the job, but outside the job also, I was querying people who were selling clothes to me, or travel agents and things like that. Things that I do normally at work when things are not right. I actually brought it out outside, which was not fair too. And at one point, I was arguing with a travel agent, and I thought, my God, why am I doing this? And she's struggling to answer me, and she was saying, ma'am, why are you asking me so many questions? You know, I'm just letting you know what it is. And I thought I'd become someone that I didn't like, and money was become, I was a slave to money. And that's not what life is all about, basically. And I sat down and I thought to myself, I'm dealing with a lot of pie in the sky things. I haven't seen anything real being created. I'm just speculating based on what the market thinks the value of a certain product or a certain security should be. But that doesn't feel very satisfying. I wasn't content with what I was doing. So I decided from trading, I want to go into investment banking, maybe in corporate finance or project financing. Maybe it's a lot better for me to be part of this team where I'm part of structuring funds or providing funds in order to build a bridge or to build a power plant or something of that sort. So I think there's something real that's being built. But in America, they're very structured in the way they have in your career path. If you have started your job as a trader, you're branded as a trader. So it's difficult for me to move to corporate finance or project financing or things like that. And when I did meet a few banks or departments who were into that, who are in corporate finance also, they will be asking me, why do you want to join corporate finance? I mean, trading is already great and you're making loads there. And it seems odd for them because to them, they feel that money is the ultimate thing, right? And if you are in a job which doesn't pay as much bonuses as you are in trading, then what's the whole point, basically? I thought this is really difficult for me to move about to a totally different work scope in the States. So I decided to come home. because I thought, okay, it's a developing economy. My mother wants me home so badly. She was afraid I'm going to get married to an American and I'll stay there forever. So every day she was calling me, when are you coming home? And I thought, okay, I'll do that. I'll come home, and I'll see what the opportunities lies are there. What are the opportunities are there for me to be able to contribute better to the Malaysian economy or so. So I came back. I was probably about 27 years old at that point in time. And the only thing that was available at that point in time was debt capital markets, because that is something that they wanted to build in Malaysia, bond markets, trading of bonds and stuff like that, basically. So I went in and I learned a whole new idea, a whole new way, a whole new sector in the financial markets, basically. So it's just like what Dr. Pradeep was saying, sometimes you have to relearn, unlearn and relearn. You have to move with the dynamics or what's the demand of the economy at that point in time in order for you to ensure that you be able to contribute. So I was in CIMB for a while, and I moved to Maybank. I was only in CIMB for about 4 months to be exact. Then I moved to Maybank. I think the mistake that I made when I was at CIMB, because I just left New York, and when I was at CIMB, unfortunately, I was in a way comparing the management style at CIMB with what I have in the US. At CIMB, well, I can't leave at 6 p.m. They think, if I leave at 6 p.m., they think, oh, is this half day for you? Which I thought was really odd, because in the US, it wasn't that way, basically. I mean, if you do your job, if you actually deliver something, hours is not something that they would measure. If you have delivered what they expect out of you, I mean, they wouldn't expect you to sit from 9 to 6 or 9 to 7 or 9 to 12 or whatsoever. But if there's something that needs to be fixed, then you probably have to stay in the office or maybe overnight to fix it. But that wasn't the case in most Malaysian organizations. So I was a bit I was a bit upset, actually. I was a bit disappointed by the whole thing, because the whole idea of me coming back also was to spend more time with family, because I was away from home for a total of 10 years as well. And even if there's nothing that can be done in the office, doesn't mean that you put in extra 3 or 4 hours, an idea might come out and you'll do something. I don't think that actually really works. So I left and I joined Maybank, and the whole culture is totally opposite. So I decided that I can't keep moving. I just have to stick to what it is and find ways to actually see what I can continue to assess or develop or help Maybank be a better bank than CIMB maybe, or look in the little area that I'm actually focused or expected to work on and see where I can actually improve and find ways to see how we can create something better for it. So I was in Maybank in corporate planning, and then the CFO thought that it's probably better that I'll be in ASEAN Bankers because of my experience in trading and all that in Deutsche Bank. So I was in Maybank and ASEAN Bankers, and I was focused more also on debt capital markets and all that. After a couple of years, I felt I wasn't really content about what I've been doing. It's the same old thing, giving proposals, giving structured financing ideas to clients, to corporates, but you don't have control over it, because at the end of the day, it's the companies or the CEOs or the CFOs of the company who knows what fits with the growth of the company and what they need in terms of their financing objectives, and they, you know, they have a better idea of where the whole project that they want to lead forward to. Whereas when I was in ASEAN Bankers, you're only just a small part of the whole big scheme of things. So I decided that maybe banking really isn't what it is. investment banking or trading. Maybe really it isn't what it was when I thought it would be in order to have a fulfilling career, because I was influenced by what I see in the movies or what I've read in books or so. And I was part of the wave where everybody wanted to be in investment banking in college or so. And I thought to myself, maybe deep down there's something else that would be better for me. And it so happens that the opportunity came for me to work in Air Asia. I met with one of the co-founders, Datuk Kamuruddin Maranun, and he said to me, I'm looking for someone in corporate finance, really because the person has just resigned and I needed someone right there to really help me to grow this company. And I thought that was quite interesting from what he has to offer. He explained to me what Air Asia is all about, what the idea and the plans going forward, and how he envisioned Air Asia to be not only just in Malaysia, but for the whole region in ASEAN. And I thought it was very interesting. And then in order to lure me, he said, well, it's a company that parties all the time. And so I did. And partying all the time is not just like having parties. I think what he really meant is that whatever achievement that we have done, we celebrate it. It's what Dr. Pradeep said, which is true. Every achievement that we did, we celebrate it, not just in terms of parties or events or recognition, congratulatory notes to all our colleagues and all that, just to make them more motivated so that they will continue the passion to be the best that they can be and have higher aim for the company, basically. So I joined the corporate finance team, and I was mostly focused on getting financing for our aircraft purchases, really because we have hundreds of aircraft orders. It's really important for us to get this aircraft delivered in time, get it financed in time, because we need to grow. If the aircraft is delivered later than our planning is, or so, then it's very difficult for us to be able to facilitate the growth, basically. So that's what I was doing. I was mostly focused on finding financing for aircraft. I really make it my job to explore all sorts of structures, not just what the banks offered to me, but also by giving some ideas to the banks. This is what I need. These are the parameters. This is the objective that I want. So we need to do this in terms of being able for Air Asia to be able to keep getting more and more aircraft every year so that they can be where they are today, which means there are certain terms that you need to take away, because most banks, especially local banks, their terms will be so tight that you can't borrow to get more aircraft. So if we agree to that kind of terms, you only get like 5 aircraft a year, whereas we're looking at 24 aircraft a year. If you have all these debt covenants in place, it'll be quite impossible to grow. So you've got to argue and negotiate and find structures that allow you to get these aircraft orders in time, facilitate the growth as well. So that's what I learned as well. You don't actually stick to what has been done before. You have to question it. You have to see how this kind of structure or terms can actually work in facilitating the growth that the company wants, basically. So my advice is that when you go into your job place, you got to find ways to be creative, to find ways to make sure that you achieve what is set for you, not just what is set for you, but also how you can do better than what you think was expected of you, basically. And don't actually just be content of what has been done before should be the same as what it is now, because things evolve. And if you stick to it, then you may never be able to grow as fast as you want to be. So after that, dealing with corporate finance, apart from aircraft financing, we were looking also at finding joint ventures around the region to see how the company can grow. because you can't just stick to Malaysia as your marketplace. There's so many countries in this region where you can expand. So we were establishing joint ventures in Thailand. We were expanding joint ventures in Indonesia after that. The latest is Philippines and India, and hopefully Japan next year, really. Why we do these joint ventures? Because this is one way for us to expand our network. Unfortunately, Malaysia is not like in Europe, where you have European open skies and you're able to go and set up companies without any limitations and restriction. You can fly anywhere you want without any limitations or restrictions in terms of aircraft types, in terms of whether you're from Malaysia or Thailand or so. But in ASEAN, unfortunately, there's no such thing as open skies. So if I want to take advantage of network or building an airline or building the domestic network in Thailand, I have to set a company. So I have to set a company in Thailand to be able to make sure that we can fly domestically in Thailand. And we can also take advantage of the bilateral agreement between Thailand and other countries. So which means Thailand to Singapore, or Thailand to Jakarta, or Thailand to China. I can take advantage of the bilateral agreements. Whereas if I just stick to my operations in Malaysia, I can only fly within Malaysia as a Malaysian registered aircraft. And I can only take advantage of the bilateral rights between Malaysia and other countries. I can't expand from Thailand to other countries. That's just how the rule is in Southeast Asia. So that's why we decided to have various joint ventures so that we can build a network bigger and faster and be able to reach out more markets than any other airlines who would just stick to their home base market, basically. So back to my story after corporate finance and doing aircraft financing and joint ventures. Then they decided to bring in treasury into my portfolio. Now, treasury is about managing the financial risk that the company is exposed to. And that's mostly the oil price volatility, the interest rates volatility, and also exchange rates. Oil price is because at least 50%, about 50% of our costs are from fuel. Interest rates, why are we exposed to interest rates? Because you need to borrow money to buy the aircraft especially. And most of our borrowings are in US dollars. And the next is foreign exchange. Why are we exposed to foreign exchange? Because our borrowings are mostly in US dollars. Not only that, but our revenues are from different currencies as well. So you need to do some hedging in order to minimize the cost or the impact of a rising ringgit to the dollar, or if the exchange rates were actually going all over the place in terms of your revenue, because you don't want your revenue to suddenly just go down or so. So that was my job, to basically just make sure that we minimize the financial risks that we're exposed from oil, from interest rates, and also from exchange rate, basically. Because I was looking at fuel hedging, and I was trying to find ways of doing fuel hedging instead of just using the financial markets, I was also talking to fuel suppliers and see, is there a way that I can hedge directly with the contract? As in, can I fix the price in the contract? Hedge everything in the contract, whether it's exchange rate or even the pricing of the oil. Then my bosses thought, okay, since you're already talking to fuel suppliers, why not you take fuel procurement under you too? So then fuel procurement, as in like buying physical supply of fuel to fuel up the plane, came under my portfolio. So then my portfolio just expanded. And it's not as though I seek for it or I wanted for it, but because the job that I do, I didn't stick to the job scope expected of me. I find ways to see how I can make my job better. How I can find ways to make sure that I can develop something better than what it was before, so that Air Asia will continue to be the best at its field, not just in terms of scheduled airline, but also in terms of treasury, in terms of financing, and in terms of aircraft purchasing and fuel procurement and all that sort of thing. And I suppose because of that, they saw maybe this portfolio should be under me too. So I took that opportunity. Soon they added investor relations because I have to deal with investors and explain how the stock prices are a certain way or why the company are doing certain things or so, and how it will impact the value of the company. And then they added insurance. So suddenly my role from corporate finance becomes a bigger portfolio. It becomes like a financial institution itself, where my team was dealing with not only just finding money to buy the aircraft, but we were raising funds, not just through bank lending, but through bonds issuance, to equity issuance or so. And then suddenly we found our portfolio become bigger and we're handling treasury. So we were dealing with secondary markets, secondary financial markets. We're dealing with derivatives or so. And then fuel procurement, which is a different point, a different aspect. It's a physical aspect of assets in the financial markets, and insurance. So it's like as though you get a whole overview, a whole experience of what a bank actually has. And even someone who works in a bank wouldn't have that kind of experiences, because they'll probably be focused on just, if you're hired in investment banking, you'll just be focused on investment banking. Or you're hired in money markets, you just focus in money markets. Whereas the team that we have created in Air Asia, in corporate finance and treasury, they have a wholesome, a holistic approach to everything. And that makes you a better person in handling corporate finance issues, or treasury issues, or fuel procurement issues, or even how you explain to investors on how the market works. And once you have that holistic overview, then you can actually work better in strategizing your work. The credit crisis, for instance, nobody expected it. That was back in 2008. But because we saw how the market was moving and we had the foresight of how the trend was moving and how the banks were behaving and how the financial markets, it doesn't make sense that what used to be the normal trend is just not working anymore. But we have about 24 aircraft on order for not only that particular year, but the year after and the year after next. If we didn't do anything, we have to defer all those aircraft deliveries. But we thought, okay, this is unprecedented. So we shouldn't just be looking at this year's delivery. We should be looking at the next 3 years' delivery, because there's no way that the banks could recapitalize themselves and be able to have that funds in order for us to get that delivery for the next 3 years to facilitate the growth. And we need this because we thought in times of crisis, others will back down, and we shouldn't. This is the opportunity for us to grow more, and we shouldn't back down. So what we did was, before the crisis became worse, at the beginning of it, when we saw how banks were behaving in a very suspicious way, we locked up financing for the next 3 years. We firm up the terms. We take out all these clauses which allows them to just say, no, we're not going to do this anymore. You know, we call that market disruption clause. We took that out. We negotiated really hard. So we were the only airlines that for the next 3 years during that credit crisis, we were able to lock up the funds, make them committed to deliver it for the next 3 years or so. And we were able to get that delivery going when others were just grounding their planes. And because of that, we were where we are today. More than 200 aircraft with over 200 network destinations that we have actually built, and with 5 operations in 5 countries. So it's difficult for any airline now, even though at low fuel prices that you see right now, it's difficult for them to come in and try to compete with us, because we have actually built ourselves a natural barriers to entry. We have grown so big, our network has become so big, and we become a regional player that it's difficult for anybody to come in and try to compete with us effectively. So in times of crisis, it's actually a times of opportunity, but don't back down. You gotta persevere. You gotta keep finding ways to make sure it works for you. Keep finding options. Don't give up. And because of that, that's how we are here today, and that's how I suddenly become a CEO. Okay. Now, as a CEO, okay, I have 10 minutes remaining. Leadership. So we come to leadership right now. Being a CEO is actually one of the toughest things I've ever done in my life. And to be honest, managing the financial markets is a lot easier than being the CEO. Because I know where the market is kind of like moving. I have more control out of it, even though markets, you can't always be above the market. The market's always in control of you, but you know where it's heading. You kind of like be able to read the trends, and you know how to strategize. Now, as a CEO, you're dealing with so many employees. You're dealing with various departments, and everyone is different. And the key thing is, how do you connect to them? How do you relate with your staff, and how do you get their buy-in? At the end of the day, in order to move forward, in order to do what the company needs to do and what it needs to achieve, you can't do it on your own. You need to get your whole team to do it with you. And how do you keep that passion alive? How do you make sure that they continue to die for the mission rather than they just become complacent? And that's tough. And that's something that I'm continue learning, basically. But the key thing is to communicate, to have interest in what your colleagues are doing, actually. Because for me, just reading reports, weekly reports or monthly reports, that's not going to work. That's not like sending emails to them, or we need to do this, or this is what we need to do through emails. That's not going to work. I have to meet everybody. The first thing I did was to meet all the heads and ask them to explain what they do, because there's no way I'll know by sitting in corporate finance at that point in time. What do you do in your job? What have you been doing? What do you want to achieve immediately? And what do you want to achieve in the next 5 years? And what are your key challenges? I sat down tirelessly for the next 1 month or so and meet every head in each department. And I make sure that I have management meeting every week. It's important that it needs to be done every week. Whether there's something to talk about is a different matter. But it's important to get all the heads together. They need to know each other. They need to talk to each other. They need to interact with each other. They need to understand what the other department is doing. Because what I noticed before, they were working in silos. One department was just looking at what this department needs to achieve. But they don't realize that by doing so, without actually interacting with the others, without looking at the whole company as opposed to just looking at their own department, that sometimes what they think would be best for that department, by earning the best return also, can actually mean that it negatively impacts other departments. And then the whole company will actually lose out as opposed to gain. So that was important for me to make sure that everybody is there. I tried to make the management meeting as short as possible, really, because having long ones, people lose interest after a while, basically. So they need to interact with each other. They need to explain issues. Issues are actually expressed in the management meeting. If they don't agree with certain department doings which could actually impact what they're doing, they have to actually express themselves there because we want to get things sorted. We want to move on and progress. What I learned also is that you need to put trust in your heads. You can't micromanage them. You have to trust that they'll do a good job. You have to empower them. You must give them accountability and responsibility. And because they know they are accountable for what they do, they will go all out and be the best that they can be. That's ownership for them. Yeah? And I don't come in and step in. If they have a good idea, I let them continue. I let them deliver the ideas. Because if you step in as a head or as a CEO and you try to change things when things are moving in a great momentum, you're going to destroy everything. Not only that, you're going to demoralize the team as well. So the key thing as a CEO for me is not only to ensure that people work well together, understand where we need to head, but they also need to be able to show that they're very capable of what they're doing in order to meet that certain objective or so. It's important to speak to everyone. I actually go down to the ground and meet with the baggage handlers, meet with the guest services and talk to them. And as a CEO, as a leader, you need to be adaptable. The way you speak to the heads of department is different from the way you speak to the guest services or the engineers or even the ground handlers or the baggage handlers. Basically, at the end of the day, what the staff wants from you is that you're interested in what they do. If you show the interest, and even they don't want to have an intellectual conversation. They just want to know that the CEO cares. You come in and you ask them, so how are you doing? And sometimes just asking about their family, and that's it, and they're happy. And it's worth that 5 minutes or 10 minutes of conversation to make one employee happy and they continue to do their job and the best that they can be, then I think it's worth it. Going down the ground also allows me to see how effective they're doing their job. So I notice a lot of things that I notice whenever I do my walkabout in the apron, in the terminal also, and I see how the work are being done are not the most efficient or the best way that needs to be done. And that would also alert the respective supervisors that they can't be complacent, because there will be, suddenly I may emerge. I may check on them. I may look at their checklist or so. So that's, as a leader, the important thing is to understand your staff, to have that trust in them, to give them empowerment, to keep that passion moving, basically. As a leader, sometimes you may have to just listen and let them do and make the necessary decision and go ahead with the plan. But sometimes, depending on the group, you may just be the one who just direct them what needs to be done and set the tone and path and stage and plan it all with them. So it really depends on the people, the team that you're working with. It also depends on the environment that you're working with. On the normal environment where that's not so pressured, I would probably be allowing most of the heads to be able to find new ways of doing things, be creative, because they have, the environment allows them to do so. But under tense and pressured or maybe disruptive environment, some heads may not know what to do, and they're looking for your direction in terms of how do we emerge from this. And that's where we have to step up and lead the way and strategize it for them. So it really depends. Certain times you listen, certain times you give that direction, but most of the time you must communicate with them and make sure that they understand what's expected out of them so that they can do their job well. Thank you.
My name is Eric. I'm doing a diploma in teaching. First question I would like to ask is, did you face any obstacles in terms of your studies? Since like 6 months away, what is the most important changes you made since becoming your
Um, Definitely, there were obstacles. In anything you do, there's always obstacles. If there's no obstacles, then you should really think whether did, did you do your job well or not. Because there's always challenges. In corporate finance, there were challenges in terms of getting the banks to come in to get to fund you a certain number of aircraft or so, because we have 24 aircraft a year. Not all banks can give you one shot funding for 24 aircraft. The challenges also in trying to get local banks to build that expertise in aviation financing, in aircraft financing, because most of the banks that we have in order to fund our purchases of aircraft are all European banks, because they have the expertise in aircraft financing, and they've been doing this for more than 40 or 50 years, ever since Airbus was established or Boeing was established. So it's either European or the American banks were good at this. But I know that because we have huge aircraft orders, we have about 475 aircraft orders that runs up to 2028. I have to be friends with all banks. Whether I hate the bank or not, I continue to, like what Dr. Pradeep said, you must keep good relationship, because you need them at some point in your life, basically. And I have to make sure that the local banks also understand what aviation financing is, because they never done it before. When we had Malaysian Airlines, but they never actually give that kind of aviation financing. It's usually a government-backed funding, which is very simple loan or so. So they have to learn, and they usually take one aircraft at a time or two aircraft at a time, which is not very very efficient way of doing it. But it's their way of trying to test what it is. And now we have more local banks involved. We have banks coming in and they take 4 aircraft or 5 aircraft at a time or 6 aircraft. So it's a long process, but you got to keep educating them. So that's the challenges of corporate finance. Challenges also in the financial markets in terms of, like, let's say suddenly liquidity is not there in the market and you need to find money to be able to grow or to buy the aircraft or so. Treasury is always lines that are not there for you to be able to do effective hedging for everything. Because hedging is supposed to mitigate your risk, but sometimes it increases your risk because the banks ask for margin calls or so. So in the end, you're not in control of your cash flows because it's depending on the financial market. So you have to negotiate it. You have to negotiate the terms and the lines that the banks give you. So they will minimize these margin calls, or they will not ask for certain margin calls if you have a certain amount of trading with them. So there are a lot of challenges. And to be honest, in corporate finance and treasury, most of the challenges are financial market challenges or external challenges, because bankers, they are fond of giving things which they have done before as opposed to trying to create or explore new things that could work.
Good morning. My name is Nadia, and I'm from the South Australian Matriculation Program at Taylor's College. I'd like to ask if you've ever had challenges in climbing the career ladder as a woman, and if so, how did you face those obstacles?
I always get this question all the time. Most of the time, people always ask me, what is it like to be a woman CEO? And I always tell them, well, I don't know, because I've only ever been a woman. But the thing is, I've never, and whenever throughout my life, I never enter into something or do something thinking that first I'm a woman. Because if you start thinking that way, then whatever that you want to achieve is going to be restricted, basically. Because you already confine yourself, you're already in your head, you're restricting yourself that my limitation is I'm a woman. So I don't do that. I go in and say, this is what I need to achieve. This is what I've been given to do as a job. I don't think, okay, this is the job, but I'm a woman, so how do I do this as a woman? I don't do that. I say, this is the job. How can I make this, how can I beat the expectation? How can I do this job better than what they expected out of me? And how can I create better value to the company? Then when you go in and do your work, you never realize whether you're the only woman or there's hardly any man in there. That wouldn't be in your head. So just focus on what needs to be done and see what you can do. Be the best that you can be in achieving it. Surprise yourself and see whether you can beat that expectation. And then you will be surprised by your own capabilities. Okay?
Alright, now we have a question from Dave E. Aireen, from your experience, please tell the grade that they were in activities to take jobs and professions and goals for others. Not as
Because of the fact that they cannot decide whether they want to go to LSE or Imperial. That's in relation to investment banking or startup. I think it really doesn't matter. Both are good schools. At the end of the day, is you see, what university teaches you is it teaches you to think in a structured way, to analyze in a structured way. It helps you to gather your thoughts and approach a problem in a structured way. And that skill itself is transferable. I think my analytical skills wouldn't have been where it is if I didn't get that kind of training at university or so. It all depends on you, your dreams and your aspiration, and your character, basically. So it doesn't really matter.
Hi, I'm Tim from a company in Thailand, and I love trading. So I would like to ask you regarding Air Asia's share price. With the panic selling among investors in the CMT research reports, what would you say to gain back investor confidence? And the second question is, any guesses on Monday's share price performance?
Any guesses where it would be? I don't know. I would have retired if I could guess where it could be. One way to gain confidence is to speak to the investors, which is what we did when we first saw how the markets were moving in the most unusual way on Friday, not yesterday, but the week on that Friday. This GMT research is an independent research. They never covered us, but I think their main in life is to pick on companies which has got the most liquidity in terms of their share price in the market. And they try to just look at numbers and just base their research is just based on the numbers to get, and they try to trigger in, this is what I understand from the markets, the brokers that we deal with. And what they do is like they take positions in order to promote their recommendation. So they are actually manipulating the market. So it's difficult. We actually went up to Bursa and the SE to explain to this, to see how it can be done, but it's difficult for them also in order to do something about these guys. The best way for us is to reassure the investors, our shareholders, the marketplace of what we do. We haven't changed what we're doing. We have been very transparent. We have to continuously communicate that. Another way is for me to buy the shares out there in the market to show that I am confident about it. The share price is so undervalued. It's way below even the net tangible asset, which is the value of all our aircraft. So can you imagine how cheap it is? So I suggest you buy some shares. Okay, that's a very good question. It's a very interesting question. So we have 5 countries like Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, India, then Japan next year. It's not very easy, but we make it our business to make it easy. We have our own culture team, which comprises about, I think it's 6 people also in the culture team, and they report to both the human resource, we don't call it human resource, we call people's department, and also the branding team, because what the culture team does is that it brings everyone together in terms, not just in terms of communication, in terms of what's happening in the company or so, but also they create activities for people to join. We have yoga retreats, we have running all around the world and where Air Asia flies to, and everyone from all around the world comes in. We make sure our parties are standardized. Like our annual party theme is the same across. Basically, we invite each other. It's a lot of excitement. Every month there's always something to do. It's probably one of the most fun department to be in, because all they do is just think about activities and trying to bring people together. So that's the culture part. We have also leadership training aspects as well, where everyone is brought together for certain training and everything. Even when it comes to induction program, it's not just from one country, but all countries who have their new recruits coming together, and we have the same kind of training. We have graduation every month for everyone as well. We make a lot of effort to make sure there's just one culture, one objective, and one understanding of what employees of Air Asia should be. We brand all employees as all stars, basically. So, yes, and I think what's really important is also the heads have to make sure that that culture that we promote is also instilled among the departments or so, basically. And it's important that the group CEO is Tony Fernandez. So I report to him, so every CEOs report to him, and he has to make sure whatever idea he has in terms of the culture and the objective that needs to be met is driven down in each country, basically. So far it hasn't been a problem. Everybody seems to have an idea what it takes to be an all-star. But it's a lot of effort, and it's a continuous effort that we cannot be content with. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay. What I expect from this generation great ideas from this generation. That's what I expect. I know there are different types of marketing now. I mean, people do social media and online marketing, and that's something that we are always looking at. We are there, we're championing social media and everything, and you would see that the team in my social media team, they're all very young. Most of the marketing team, they're very young as well, because we need fresh ideas. The creative team are very young as well, because you need to have a good set of images and approach to the market in a way that's appealing. You need to keep the brand relevant. So that's why we always have young people all the time coming in all areas, basically. Yep. So, and in terms of us supporting tailors, well, we're happy to do. We're happy to support tailors in the ways that we can. So please give us a proposal and we'll look into it. That's like a couple.
So sorry, but time has run out.
One last question. All right, you can go back to the thank you. It's regarding your experience with people. I was very focused on the employees and what you do. But wouldn't there be a tendency to micromanage where and how do you organize?
It really depends, you know. If a department is doing good, I will let the heads do what they've been doing. But if the department is suffering, that's where I come in and assist the heads, basically. So there are certain areas where you want to micromanage because you feel that you need to in order to bring it up, to progress, to move forward. There are certain areas where you just got to leave where it is. Don't try and reinvent the wheel, or don't try to just kill something when it's actually doing very, very well. So it really depends on the situation. It depends on the team also. Certain team needs to be micromanaged. But that's tiring, really, you know, to micromanage certain teams. So maybe we then have to relook at the team. After we have sorted out the problem or the issues, the fundamentals of it, then maybe we have to relook at the team to ensure that we move forward from there. Okay?
Thank you, Ms. Aireen. With real-life applications that related to what Dr. Carlin had said earlier as well, such as choosing the right bond or celebrating the book. By the way, Benji, I heard that you will be interning at Air Asia.
Yes, in fact, I'll be interning in Air Asia Berhad. It's always been my dream to be an airline company.
Wow, I guess we have a great time then.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing Aireen in the sky soon. Let's move on, shall we?
Encouraging the generation of thinkers. The iLEAD conference aims to produce participants who generate ideas worth implementing. Leveraging on the presence of key industry speakers, ideas worth investing in, or iLEAD in short, will be a platform for shortlisted candidates to present their ideas to the speakers themselves. Each speaker will provide their feedback, and if they do find the project worth investing in, they may mentor and/or fund the project, turning their ideas into reality.
A total of 10 groups sent in their ideas. However, only the best 4 were chosen to present their ideas today. The first shortlisted group of participants is none other than Jane by Jenny Charles Danlu, Ping Shi Chuan, and Ping Shi. All hailing from the School of Computing and IT and are trying for what too.
Catering to people with food allergies, KP is a mobile application that allows people to choose alternative food ingredients for their meals. So that sounds helpful.
Yes, that's true.
Haven't had any food allergies?
Actually, that's not intolerant.
See, I think this mobile application will be perfect for you. Alright, without further delay, let us now invite Pink Shizzy to share with us.
Hi, good morning everyone.
Morning.
All our honest guests here. My name is Vijay. I'm a student from Science Award and I'm studying School of Computing and IT in Delhi University. So today I would like to introduce two of my teammates who work with me all the time, round the clock side by side, and they are Dennis and Swan. Unfortunately, they can't be on the oldest because they are so I'll be the one who presents today. So first of all, I have a question for the crowd here. Now give me a hand, how many of you here have food allergies? There's quite a number here, and in fact, one-third of people in Malaysia have food allergies. And based on studies online, this number will keep increasing throughout the year. So the founder of this idea is that treat a girl who born with food allergies to take there's so many foods in this eat. So as a friend to her, I have seen her struggle a lot when it comes to food ordering. She has a lot of food that she desires to eat, and she can't because the ingredient is like the things of food that she allergic with. And also, even she reminds the chef to actually remove the ingredients from the food, but the chef always has to do that. So it turns out that they always have to put second time for her. So, and I believe that those who raise their hands and more people out there are facing the same problem as that is facing. So, but however, until today, food ordering I think does not cater for people who are allergic. Okay. So today we are going to challenge the status quo of traditional food menu. Today we are changing it. We are going to redesign the food ordering process, in order to cater for people who have food allergies. So ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Fooder. So Fooder is an app that serves customizable food menus. So imagine that if I'm a person who has an allergy with cake, so I want to purchase, before I this solution will be implemented in airline companies. So we'll kind of tell you why. So imagine that I'm a person with allergy with egg and I wanted to pre-plan my meal before the flight. So that I can have a meal during the flight. So what I have to do is, using this app, I can actually choose the food right here. And then I can actually see what is inside the food and the ingredient in that, and what is the rating, the review, and how other people think about this food. And I actually can disable the ingredients that I don't want it inside the food. So and then it's just 3 steps, it's very simple. And last, you just have to enjoy your meal for fun. Alright. So why airline companies? First of all, airline company requires a more effective and efficient way to deliver their services. This is because airline companies they have to prepare the food before the departure of the plane, right? So imagine that if I'm a person right now with allergies with egg, so I can't decide whether I should take this meal or not because the food inside contains the ingredient that I can't eat. Then what I have to do is I can't tell the airline that please remove the egg from the fried rice. So it turns out that I don't got much choice. So it turns out that I did not take anything. So with Fooder, we actually can provide a customized service with low cost. And for people like me who have food allergies, it actually is a bonus factor for me because we can enhance the customer experience. So in order to make it successful, this is what we need. We need mentors in order to guide us in terms of the business processes and airline processes. And we also need data and statistics in order for us to study the market. And third, we need money to build it up. So this is the funding allocation in allowance infrastructure development and commercialization fund. The total amount of 50,000. We'll have to break down on those funding allocation. And our plan is this project the project timeline is around 1 year. And if we get more resources, we can reduce that. So we believe that this solution can impact a lot of people who have food allergies, and the value proposition that we can deliver for airline companies is to put the customer as a top priority in terms of food services. And we have done a big survey recently. It's about so out of 80 respondents, there are 80% people willing to buy a meal if the airline, if they are able to customize their own menu. So our total vision is we hope that the society respect the people who have food allergies and actually cater some sort of procedure in order for them to customize their ingredients that they cannot eat. And I have to specially highlight that this solution is not just for people with food allergies. People who doesn't have food allergies can also customize their own ingredients as well. So that's all. Thank you.
Ms. Aireen, you are now welcome to provide your feedback you could present suggestions to improve this idea.
Trying to understand the concept. So it's an app whereby you can identify what the ingredients are in all the menu the menu that we have.
The concept is like that way. So I have a lot of food there. Let's say I buy a burger.
Yeah.
So the burger has veggie, tomatoes, maybe beef patty or chicken patty. And so I would like to have the chicken patty, but I don't want tomatoes, and I want a cheese. And and I want vegetables. So I can actually choose what I want for
Okay. Would it be easier if we list down all the ingredients of each of our meal for the, rather than having an app to identify whether this meal is actually not suitable for you or so? Or wouldn't it be easier to have like an idea, what we call it, the brain idea thing, where we crowdsource ideas, and then you put your idea in there in terms of the kind of meals that's suitable for food allergic people, as opposed to building an app?
Well, most of the time, like when we wanted to eat fried rice because maybe I love fried rice very much. But I wanted to eat that. However, most of the fried rice contains. So it turns out that I can't really buy the fried rice. I have to ask the chef to actually remove it. So I only consume it. So with this, it actually communicates the person with reality with the chef through the platform.
Okay, understand. I'm not so sure about having an app to, because it seems to me like you want to create an app whereby if the passenger books a ticket, then they can also customize their meals. Is that what you're trying to do? Okay, so if you have customization of meals, I think it's going to be not so cost efficient for us because we have to cater for the masses basically. But what we can do is try to revamp the meals to make it interesting that would cater for every type of passengers. Perhaps that's something that's we need to look into it because an app would be more of like what we need to do in order to increase the sales better, to get people to buy more food. Like right now, there's only a certain percentage of passengers buying food. How can we increase that as opposed to customizing it? Because I think that value addedness would probably be a little bit less in terms of finding ways on how to reach out to customers to remind them that they need to buy their meals. Because right now, most of them, they will just buy their seats first. Then they buy their meal later.
For information, if we allow to do so to actually integrate this solution with Air Asia, so during the online booking process, we can actually integrate this as a platform. So it's not really an app, it's actually integrated together with the platform.
Okay. Okay. Maybe what we'll do, we can, because we need new ideas in terms of our own meals. Maybe what we can do, we can expand it further into that line as opposed to just on customization. Because by redirecting to what we need in terms of the kind of meals that can cater for more people, that would probably be better in terms of creating better values in a company. So maybe we need to do some kind of a mentorship on this one. Okay?
Thank you, JP, for presenting target and this Irene for your feedback. Maybe now invite Dr. Tan and Mr. Dana to present a token of appreciation to Ms. Irene for presentation today. Give Ms. Irene another round of applause.